In the late autumn of 1454, Brussels was shrouded in a damp mist. On an open plot in the northwest corner of the city, a Gothic bell tower slowly revealed its majestic form, its spire piercing the grey sky, the reliefs on its stone walls looming faintly through the fog, and the statue of St. Michael slaying the dragon standing atop the tower, the sword in its hand still dotted with wet stone dust. Messens climbed down from the scaffolding carrying their tools, wiping their rough palms on their aprons, their faces etched with exhaustion yet flushed with excitement. "Master Lemmy, the last pendulum weight has been installed," a young Messin called toward the entrance of the bell tower. Moments later, a man dressed in a dark brown robe emerged. His name was Guillaume Lemmy, the spiritual architect of the bell tower, and like Romout II Keldermans, who designed the blueprints. Lemmy's mission had never been about mechanics. His hair was already streaked with gray, but his eyes were as firm as quenched steel. On his left ring finger, he wore an engraved silver ring, a token personally bestowed by the Bishop of Brussels, symbolizing his connection to the city's soul. "Tell everyone to retreat to the edge of the square." Lemmy's voice was soft yet authoritative. "What happens next is not for the uninitiated to witness." Though confused, the masons obeyed. Soon, only Lemmy and a priest clutching a Bible remained beside the bell tower. The priest handed Lemmy a velvet box, and as it opened, a silver coin glinted faintly through the mist. On its obverse was a relief of St. Michael, on its reverse the coat of arms of Brussels, and around its edge was inscribed a Latin phrase, Tempus et anima civitatis, time and the soul of the city. "This is the covenant coin, soaked in holy spring water for 49 days, the priest's voice trembled with piety. "Once embedded in the pendulum, your bloodline will be bound to the bell tower, and your descendants will be its guardians for eternity. Have you considered this? It is not an honor, it is an eternal chain." Lemmy took the coin, feeling a cool tingle on his fingertips, as if life itself flowed within it. He looked up at the statue of St. Michael atop the tower, then down at the children playing in the square, their laughter cutting through the mist, reaching his ears. "Brussels needs a stable anchor of time," he said. "Industry will advance, dynasties will rise and fall, but time must not be chaotic. I am willing to be that anchor." The priest nodded and followed Lemmy into the bell tower. The internal staircase was narrow and steep, each step creaking underfoot. The pendulum hung in the center of the tower, its massive bronze weight standing as tall as a man, adorned with intricate carvings that echoed the statue above. Lemmy stood beneath the pendulum, took a deep breath, and began to regulate his breathing in a peculiar rhythm, his chest expanding in time with the pendulum's natural swing as he inhaled, his pulse seeming to merge with the creak of the gears on the wall as he exhaled. "This is the rhythmic breathing technique," Lemmy explained to the priest. "My ancestors have passed this down since the Crusades. It allows the human rhythm to resonate with natural energy. Now, I shall engrave this resonance into the bell tower forever." He pressed the silver coin into a groove at the top of the pendulum, then closed his eyes. The priest watched as beads of sweat formed on Lemmy's forehead and his face paled, yet his breathing remained steady and rhythmic. Suddenly, the pendulum twitched, not from the wind, but as if it had gained a heartbeat of its own. The silver coin then began to glow with a faint silver light, and the bronze carvings around the groove seemed to awaken, spreading down the pendulum and forming an invisible chain of energy with the gears on the wall. "It is done." Lemmy opened his eyes, his voice weak with fatigue. He watched as the pendulum swung slowly, each oscillation aligning perfectly with the markings on the wall. From this day forth, all members of the Lemmy family must learn this breathing technique. When the current guardian passes, the next generation must infuse the coin with their bloodline's power within 7 days, otherwise, time will run amok. The priest finished, making the sign of the cross on his chest. May Saint Michael bless your legacy. And Brussels. That evening, the bell tower's chimes rang out efficiently for the first time. Unlike the bells of other churches, their tone was unusually steady, like a heartbeat pulsating at the center of the city. The townspeople in the square stopped in their tracks, looking up at the bell tower, a sense of calm settling over them, unaware that within those chimes lay a millennium-old covenant between a family and their city. Lemmy stood atop the bell tower, watching as the setting sun gilded the city. He touched the silver ring on his finger, then glanced at the glowing silver coin on the pendulum. From this day forth, we are a part of the bell tower, he whispered. In October 1893, the roar of steam locomotives had replaced the clip-clop of horse-drawn carriages in Brussels. Factory chimneys rose like a black forest on the edge of the city, and each morning, the shrill sound of factory whistles cut through the sky, rousing workers from their sleep. Only the bell tower in the city center retained its 400-year-old appearance, its stone reliefs smoothed by time, the statue of St. Michael still standing tall atop the tower, though the stone dust on its sword had long been washed away by wind and rain. Jean Lemmy sat by the window of the bell tower's attic, holding a cup of cold coffee. At 78, he was the 18th generation time guardian of the Lemmy family. His hair was completely white, his back hunched with age, but his eyes still held the same steadfastness as his ancestor Guillaume. Outside the window, a newsboy waved a newspaper, shouting, "Breaking news! Smuggled ivory seized at Antwerp port. Congo colonial trade reaches new heights." Jean sighed softly. He did not like this era of rapid change. Steam locomotives were too fast. Factory rhythms too hurried. People had become like marionettes chased by clock gears, no longer taking the time to feel the natural rhythm of sunrise and sunset. And that was the core of what the Lemmy family guarded. He looked down at his hands that had touched the covenant coin on the pendulum countless times, hands that had calibrated the bell tower's time with the rhythmic breathing technique. Now, they trembled even when lifting a cup of hot coffee. "Grandpa, it's time to take your medicine," a clear voice called from the staircase. Pierre appeared, carrying a metal first aid kit. He was 12 years old, with curly brown hair and eyes as clear as a deer's. He was Jean's only grandson and the next heir to the Lemmy family's legacy, though for now, he knew nothing of his destiny. Jean took the pills and swallowed them with the cold coffee. "Pierre, did your teacher talk about the bell tower's history at school today?" he asked. "Yes." Pierre set down the first aid kit and stared curiously at the antiques in the attic, an old map hanging on the wall, a bronze compass on the desk, and a wooden box filled with gear parts. "Teacher said the bell tower was built in 1454 by the architect Ramout II Keldermans. He also said the statue of St. Michael on top is for warding off evil spirits." Jean smiled but said nothing. The time had not yet come to tell Pierre the family's secret. According to Lemmy tradition, the inheritance ceremony was to be held on the child's 16th birthday. Until then, he was to live like any ordinary boy. But Jean's health was deteriorating rapidly. The doctor had said he had at most 3 months to live. He wondered if he would live to see Pierre's 16th birthday. "Grandpa, Why do you always stay in the bell tower? Pierre walked to the window, looking out at the square with Jean. Other grandfathers go for walks in the park or play chess in cafes. Because this is the quietest place in Brussels. Jean stroked his grandson's hair. Listen how steady the bell tower's chimes are. They calm the mind. Pierre listened as the bell tower's hourly chime rang out on the distance. Boom. 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 9 times in total. But teacher said everyone uses pocket watches now. The bell tower's chimes aren't important anymore, he said. Jean's expression darkened. They are important, he said solemnly. Far more important than pocket watches. Pocket watches measure mechanical time, but the bell tower measures the city's living time. Pierre blinked, confused. He did not understand what living time meant, just as he did not understand why his grandfather often stared blankly at the pendulum, or why he wore the same engraved silver ring as his grandfather, a gift his grandfather had placed on his finger at birth, saying it was a family heirloom. That afternoon, when Pierre returned from school, he found a guest at home, Father Marcel of St. Michael's Church. Father Marcel was one of the few who knew the Lemay family's secret. His ancestors had witnessed Guillaume Lemay forge the covenant 400 years earlier, and since then, the Marcel family has served as the Lemays' assistants, aiding in the inheritance ceremony. Jean, how is your health? Father Marcel sat on the living room sofa, his expression grave. I heard you were hospitalized again. Just old age. Jean leaned back in his chair, his breathing labored. I asked you here to talk about Pierre. My time is short. The inheritance ceremony may need to be held early. Father Marcel frowned. But according to tradition, the child must be 16. Traditions are rigid, but people are not. Jean interrupted. If I don't teach him the rhythmic breathing technique and tell him about the covenant coin now, when I die, the Lemay legacy will be broken. And when that happens, all of Brussels will suffer. Father Marcel fell silent. He knew Jean spoke the truth. For 400 years, whenever the Lemay inheritance was interrupted, strange temple disturbances had plagued Brussels. In 1567, when a guardian was killed in the religious wars, the city's clocks collectively slowed by 2 hours. In 1789, when the inheritance ceremony was delayed by a month, the townspeople suffered 3 days of daylight hallucinations, believing night had become day. These incidents had been dismissed by officials as mechanical failures or mass hysteria, but Father Marcel and Jean knew they were signs that the time anchor was weakening. I will help you. Father Marcel finally nodded. But Pierre is still too young. You cannot tell him everything at once. We must guide him slowly. I will come tomorrow to talk to him about the family's history. Jean sighed with relief. He knew he could trust Father Marcel. Just then, Pierre ran down the stairs, holding a wooden model of the bell tower he had carved in his spare time, its clock face adorned with crooked numbers. Father Marcel, look at the model I made, he shouted excitedly. Father Marcel took the model and smiled. It's wonderful, Pierre. You have a talent for architecture. He glanced at Jean, his eyes filled with concern. This innocent child had no idea of the great responsibility that awaited him. Early the next morning, Father Marcel arrived. Instead of revealing the family's secret directly, he told Pierre stories about the bell tower, how a 16th-century guardian had saved the pendulum from a fire, how an 18th-century guardian had used the bell to warn the city of an impending flood. Pierre listened spellbound, realizing for the first time that the seemingly ordinary bell tower held so many extraordinary tales. Were those guardians heroes? Pierre asked. Not heroes, guardians, Father Marcel corrected. Heroes are worshipped, but guardians are forgotten. Their mission is to protect the city in silence. Pierre nodded, half understanding. He looked at his grandfather and suddenly saw him in a new light. Could his grandfather be one of these guardians? But fate had other plans. 3 days later, in the early hours of the morning, Jean Lemay passed away in his sleep. Pierre was still in his room when the housekeeper discovered Jean's body. He was sitting in his rocking chair by the window, clutching a silver coin in his hand, his eyes fixed on the bell tower outside, a peaceful smile on his face. When Pierre rushed to the living room, Father Marcel was already there, looking at his grandfather's cold body. Pierre suddenly understood, and tears poured out. "Grandpa! Wake up, Grandpa!" he cried, throwing himself onto Jean's lap. Father Marcel patted his back gently, his heart filled with anxiety. Jean had died too suddenly. The inheritance ceremony had not been held, and Pierre did not even know the Covenant coin existed. He looked at the coin in Jean's hand, the Lemay family's Covenant coin, now dull and lifeless, its glow extinguished. At that moment, a strange sound echoed from the bell tower in the distance, not the usual hourly chime, but a chaotic clang, as if the bell clapper had struck the bell randomly. Father Marcel's face turned pale. He knew the covenant had been broken. "Pierre, stop crying." Father Marcel lifted him up, his expression serious. "There is something very important I must tell you." Pierre looked up at Father Marcel, his face streaked with tears. He could feel that something had changed. The air felt heavy. The sunlight outside had lost its warmth, and even the clock on the wall was shaking uncontrollably. Father Marcel took the silver coin from Jean's hand and placed it in Pierre's palm. "This coin is the Lemay family's heirloom," he said. "Your grandfather, your great-grandfather, and our ancestors 400 years ago all used it to guard the bell tower. Now, this responsibility falls to you." Pierre stared at the coin in his hand, then at his grandfather's body. A chill ran down his spine. He did not yet understand what it meant, but he could feel that his grandfather's death was somehow connected to this coin, to the bell tower. Meanwhile, inside the bell tower, the massive pendulum was swinging wildly. The gears were still turning, but they had lost their rhythm. The hands on the clock face were moving backward at a visible pace from 3 in the morning to 2, then to 1, retreating to the moment the covenant was forged in 1454. Time in Brussels was about to run amok. The first to notice the anomaly was Fran Oys the baker. He woke up promptly at 4 in the morning, as usual, and walked into his bakery according to Brussels time. This was the perfect hour to start preparing the first batch of bread for the day. Fermentation, kneading, baking, everything had to be done by 6 to catch the morning market crowd. Strange. Why is the yeast acting so slowly today? Fran Oys frowned as he looked at the dough. Normally, by this time, the dough would have doubled in size, but today it had barely risen, as if still asleep. He checked the clock on the wall. It read 4:10. Correct. He walked to the window to check the sky, and froze. Outside, the sky was pitch black, with only a few stars still visible, not the faint dawn he expected at 4 in the morning. Could my clock be broken? Fran Oys muttered, reaching into his drawer for his pocket watch. The pocket watch also read 4:10. Impossible. Fran Ois rubbed his eyes. How can it be this dark at 4 in the morning? A wave of exhaustion suddenly washed over him, his eyelids heavy as lead. Though he had just woken up, he felt as if he had worked for over 10 hours straight. Must be tired, imagining things, he mumbled, sitting down on a chair in the corner to rest for a few minutes. But as soon as he sat down, he fell asleep, his head lolling back, snoring softly. At the same time, on the other side of the city, banker Armand sat at the dining table in his robe, a lavish breakfast in front of him: fried eggs, bacon, toast, and a cup of steaming coffee. Why hasn't the newspaper arrived yet? He glanced at the clock on the wall, which read 7 in the evening. By habit, he ate dinner at 7 p.m. and breakfast at 7 a.m., but today, he was convinced it was morning and insisted on having breakfast. "Sir, it is 7 in the evening." The butler stood beside him, hesitating. "Dinner is ready. It's your favorite beef bourguignon." "Nonsense!" Armand slammed his fist on the table angrily. "Look outside, the sun is about to rise." "How can it be evening?" The butler looked out the window helplessly. It was pitch black night, and the street lamps were already lit. "Sir, your pocket watch." "My pocket watch is fine." Armand pulled out his pocket watch and flipped it open. "Look, 7 o'clock in the morning." The butler leaned closer and saw that the hands did indeed point to 7, but the AM and PM indicators were flickering wildly, switching back and forth as if malfunctioning. Before he could say anything else, Armand suddenly clutched his head, his face contorted in pain. "My head. It hurts," he groaned, then fell sideways from his chair, unconscious. Similar incidents were happening all across Brussels. Factory workers fell asleep en masse at noon, halting production lines. Schoolchildren suddenly insisted it was dinner time during class, pulling out their lunch boxes. In hospitals, patients' pulses and temperatures became erratic, leaving doctors baffled. They could find nothing physically wrong, yet some claimed it was lunchtime at 3 in the morning, while others insisted it was bedtime at 5 in the afternoon. "It must be the bell tower." The first to point the finger was Jacques the watchmaker. His shop was right next to the bell tower, and every morning when he opened his door, he could see the clock face. That morning, as usual, he looked up at the bell tower and was shocked to find its hands pointing to 10 o'clock, while his pocket watch read 1 in the afternoon, a 3-hour discrepancy. Jacques immediately gathered all the watchmakers in the city, grabbed their tools, and climbed up to the bell tower. They inspected every gear, every spring, every bearing, even disassembling the pendulum weight, but found no issues. "The gears mesh perfectly, the springs are properly tensioned, and the bearings show no wear," Jacques said, confused, squatting beneath the pendulum. "All parts meet the standards, so why are the hands 3 hours slow?" "Could someone have adjusted the hands intentionally?" a young watchmaker asked. "Impossible." Jacques shook his head. "Adjusting the clock face hands requires special tools, and it would disrupt the gear movement." "But the gears are running perfectly normally." He stood up and touched the pendulum weight, a massive bronze block with worn carvings. "Unless the hands are not driven by gears." His words left the other watchmakers stunned. "If not gears, then what?" Magic? News spread quickly across Brussels. People gathered in the square, staring up at the bell tower's clock face, panic etched on their faces. "The devil has come." An old woman knelt on the ground, praying to the statue of Saint Michael atop the tower. "Saint Michael's power has weakened," allowing the devil to disrupt time. It's not the devil, it's the Industrial Revolution angering God. A worker shouted, "We've built too many factories, burned too much coal. God is punishing us with time chaos." Rumors grew more outlandish by the hour. Some claimed to have seen ghosts in the bell tower, others said they heard the pendulum moaning, and a few even insisted that staring at the clock face for more than a minute would curse you to lose your sense of time forever. Panic spread like a plague. Shops closed their doors, factories halted production, schools suspended classes, and Brussels descended into chaos. Pierre and Father Marcel stood at the edge of the square, watching the scene with grave expressions. "This is the consequence of the broken covenant," Father Marcel said. "Deprived of the guidance of the living rhythm, the bell tower has begun to revert to its original time, Vatican Standard Time from 1454, which is exactly 3 hours behind Brussels' current time. And the townspeople's confused sense of time is because of this?" Pierre asked. Father Marcel had already told him the family secret that the Lemmies were time guardians, bound to the bell tower by their bloodline and the Covenant coin, tasked with keeping the city's time stable. Now that his grandfather was dead and the Covenant broken, the bell tower's time had spiraled out of control. "Yes," Father Marcel nodded. "The bell tower's time field covers all of Brussels. As it reverts to the past, it disrupts people's biological clocks. Those who are sensitive experience time confusion, while those who are physically weak fall unconscious, unable to withstand the clash between the two time frequencies." He looked at Pierre, his eyes filled with hope. "Only you can fix this, Pierre. Your blood carries the same energy as the bell tower. If you complete the inheritance ceremony and reactivate the Covenant coin, time will return to normal." Sweat broke out on Pierre's palms. He was only 12. Still a child. How could he bear such a heavy responsibility? "But I don't know the rhythmic breathing technique, and I don't know how to activate the coin," he whispered. "I will teach you," Father Marcel said. "But you must learn quickly. The chaos will only get worse. If we delay, more people may fall unconscious or even die." Pierre looked at the panicked crowd in the square, then thought of his grandfather's eyes before he died, filled with hope and trust. He clenched the Covenant coin in his hand, its cold touch calming him slightly. "I'll learn." He looked up, his eyes determined. "I want to protect Brussels, just like Grandpa." Father Marcel nodded approvingly. He took Pierre back to Jean's house and retrieved an ancient parchment from a wooden box in the attic, the Lemmy family's inheritance manual, which contained the secrets of the rhythmic breathing technique and the steps of the inheritance ceremony. The core of the rhythmic breathing technique is to synchronize your breathing impulse with the pendulum's swing. Father Marcel opened the parchment, pointing to the diagrams on it. "Inhale for 4 seconds, hold your breath for 2, exhale for 6. Repeat this rhythm until you feel your body merge with the bell tower." Pierre followed Father Marcel's instructions, practicing his breathing. At first, he struggled to master the rhythm, inhaling too quickly, exhaling too short. But gradually, he felt an instinctive response in his body whenever he breathed in the 4-2-6 rhythm. The Covenant coin in his palm grew warm, as if guiding him. "Excellent." Father Marcel watched him. "You have a natural talent for being a guardian. Now, we must prepare for the inheritance ceremony. It must be held beneath the pendulum, preferably at the top of the hour, when the bell tower's energy is strongest." Pierre nodded, feeling a mix of nervousness and anticipation. He knew this was his duty, and his promise to his grandfather. Just then, a shout rang out from outside the window. Pierre and Father Marcel rushed to look, and saw the crowd in the square pointing in the same direction, their faces filled with disbelief. "What is that?" someone cried. Pierre followed their gaze and saw that on the center of the bell tower square, where there had been nothing moments before, a group of people dressed in medieval clothing had suddenly appeared. Women in corsets, peddlers in pointed hats, scribes holding parchment scrolls. A medieval market, materializing in 1893 Brussels. Father Marcel's face turned ashen. "Echoes of the past," he muttered. "The energy from the broken covenant is so strong that it has projected the market scene from 1454 into the present." Pierre stared wide-eyed at the magical market. He could see the bread in the women's baskets, hear the peddlers' cries, and even smell the scent of fresh bread and pickled herring in the air. This was not an illusion, it was real history, unfolding before his eyes. "We must hold the ceremony immediately." Father Marcel grabbed Pierre's hand. "The appearance of these echoes means the time field is on the verge of collapse. If we delay, Brussels may be trapped in the past forever." Pierre clenched the covenant coin in his hand and nodded. He knew the final moment had come. Postman Jean Dupont was having the worst day of his life. First, he had been chased by a neighbor's dog for 3 blocks on his way to work, then he had discovered a flat tire on his bicycle, and now he was staring in disbelief at the scene before him. The once empty bell tower square had transformed into a bustling medieval market, and his mailbag was still outside the post office across the square. "What is this? A movie set?" Dupont rubbed his eyes, thinking he was hallucinating. He had been a postman for 20 years, walking through the bell tower square every day, and had never seen anything like this. Women in corsets haggled with blacksmiths in leather hats, a peddler selling pickled herring weaved through the crowd with a tray, and a scribe knelt at a wooden table, writing on a parchment scroll with an inkwell beside him. Most strangely, these people seemed completely unaware of the 19th century buildings around them, their eyes only focused on the market itself, ignoring the nearby steam locomotives and telephone poles. "Excuse me, a bread seller pushed a cart past Dupont, nearly hitting him. "Pardon me, can you see me?" Dupont couldn't help but ask. The seller paused, looking Dupont up and down. Dupont was dressed in his 1893 postman's uniform, with a stiff cap, standing out sharply against the medieval attire. "Are you a stranger?" the seller asked, his accent thick with Flemish. "Today is Wednesday, the market day in the Grand Place. Didn't you know?" Dupont was dumbfounded. Today was Friday, and this was 1893, not 1454. He wanted to explain, but didn't know how. How could he tell a medieval peddler that he was from 400 years in the future? "I'm hungry, I want to buy a loaf of bread." Dupont suddenly changed his mind. He realized this was a once-in-a-lifetime chance to witness medieval life firsthand. He pulled the 1,893 franc coin from his pocket and held it out to the seller. "Is this enough?" The seller frowned at the coin. "What kind of money is this?" "I only accept livres." The livre was a currency used in France and Belgium during the Middle Ages, long since obsolete. Dupont felt embarrassed. He had no medieval currency. Just then, he noticed a bronze button fall out of his mailbag, a button he had accidentally tucked away while mending his clothes the previous day, adorned with a simple pattern. He picked it up and handed it to the seller. "What about this?" "I'll trade it for a loaf of bread." The seller examined the button, then nodded. "It has a nice pattern, I'll take it." He pulled a rough black loaf of bread from his cart and handed it to DuPont. DuPont took the bread and took a bite. It was coarse, with a nutty flavor, completely different from the refined white bread of 1893. "Thank you," he said. "You're welcome," the seller smiled, pulling a small bronze penny from his pocket and handing it to DuPont. "Here's your change." DuPont took the penny and stared at it in shock. Its edges were rusted, and the king's face engraved on it was unfamiliar to him, with a faint Latin inscription on the reverse, clearly a medieval coin. He wanted to ask more, but the seller had already pushed his cart away, disappearing into the crowd. DuPont wandered through the market, clutching the penny. He saw a farmer's wife selling fresh vegetables similar to those in 1893, but more primitive in appearance. A blacksmith forging horseshoes, sparks flying onto the ground with a hiss. And a group of children gathered around the candy seller, screaming with excitement, dressed in rags, their faces smudged with dirt, yet smiling brighter than anyone DuPont had seen in 1893. "This is what real life should be," DuPont muttered. Every day, he rushed through 1893 Brussels, seeing only hurried people, each chasing a living, rarely smiling. The Industrial Revolution had brought convenience, but it had also stolen the warmth of life. Just then, the market began to blur. The farmer's wife's figure distorted, the peddler's cries grew distant, and the scent in the air faded. DuPont rubbed his eyes, watching as the medieval scene slowly faded, like a watercolor painting caught in the rain. "What's happening?" he heard someone shout. The people around the square also noticed the change. Pulling out their pocket watches, the hands had stopped flickering and were now moving normally. DuPont looked up at the bell tower, watching as its hands jumped forward rapidly from 10 to 11, then to 12. When they reached 1 in the afternoon, they stopped, and a steady chime rang out. Boom! As the chime echoed, the last traces of the market disappeared. The square returned to its 1893 appearance, steam locomotives passing in the distance, telephone poles standing tall. Only a few medieval relics remained on the ground: pieces of rough cloth, a grain of wheat, and the black loaf of bread and bronze penny in DuPont's hands. "Time is back to normal," someone shouted, and the square erupted in cheers. The unconscious began to wake, the confused regained their sense of time, and everyone breathed a sigh of relief. DuPont walked to the post office, picked up his mailbag, and carefully placed the bronze penny inside, proof of his journey through time, a memento of his extraordinary experience. He looked up at the bell tower and saw a young boy and a priest walking out, the boy's face tired but determined. DuPont did not know who the boy was, but he could feel that it was this child who had saved Brussels from the time crisis. He bowed slightly in the boy's direction, a gesture of respect for the guardian, and gratitude for the magical experience he had been granted. Inside the bell tower, Pierre leaned against the pendulum, gasping for breath. The inheritance ceremony had just ended, and his body was weak, but he could feel a strange connection forming between himself and the bell tower. He could hear the gears turning, feel the pendulum's rhythm, and even see the time field flowing through the city like a warm river. "You did it, Pierre." Father Marcel walked over, a proud smile on his face. "The covenant has been reborn, and the bell tower's time field is stable." Pierre nodded, looking at the covenant coin on the pendulum. It had regained its glow, emitting a soft silver light. The bronze carvings around the groove reactivated, forming a stable chain of energy with the gears on the wall. "Did Grandpa see this?" he whispered. "He definitely did." Father Marcel patted his shoulder. "He would be so proud of you." Pierre smiled. He could feel his grandfather's presence not beside him, but in his blood, in every gear of the bell tower, in every inch of the city's soil. The Lemmy legacy had never been the responsibility of one person, but a relay passed down from generation to generation. As they walked out of the bell tower, they saw the crowd celebrating in the square, children running and playing, adults hugging each other, their faces filled with relief. Pierre looked at them and suddenly understood the true meaning of being a time guardian, not to control time, but to protect these smiles, to safeguard the life and warmth of the city. "Do I have to come to the bell tower every day to practice the rhythmic breathing technique?" Pierre asked Father Marcel. "Yes." Father Marcel nodded. "The guardian's duty is eternal. But you don't have to stay here all the time like your grandfather. You can live like an ordinary child, go to school, play with friends. You only need to synchronize your breathing with the bell tower once every hour." Pierre nodded. He liked this arrangement, protecting the city while still having a childhood. He looked up at the top of the bell tower, where the statue of Saint Michael glinted in the sunlight, as if smiling at him. "Let's go, Pierre," Father Marcel said. "The housekeeper has prepared dinner. We should head home." Pierre followed Father Marcel out of the square, glancing back at the bell tower one last time. The pendulum was swinging steadily, its tick-tock like the heartbeat of the city. He knew that from this day forward, he was the guardian of Brussels, and he would use his blood and his duty to protect that heartbeat, until it was time to pass it on to the next generation of the Lemmy family. The moment the Phantom Market appeared, Father Marcel knew they had only 1 hour left. He grabbed Pierre's hand and rushed through the panicked crowd toward the bell tower's entrance. The tower's doors were normally open, but now they were surrounded by curious townspeople eager to see what had caused the time chaos. "Make way! Make way!" Father Marcel held up his priest's cross, shouting loudly, "I am Father Marcel of St. Michael's Church, sent by the bishop to handle the sacred affairs of the bell tower." At the sight of the cross, the townspeople stepped aside. In 19th-century Brussels, religion still held great authority, and people trusted the priest's words implicitly. Father Marcel pulled Pierre into the bell tower, and the doors closed behind them, shut by a helpful townsman who thought the priest needed a quiet space to exorcise evil spirits. The staircase inside the bell tower was steeper and darker than Pierre had imagined. Oil lamps hung on the walls, casting long shadows on the stone steps, and the air was thick with the smell of damp mold and copper rust. Pierre gripped Father Marcel's hand tightly, his palms sweating. He could feel the bell tower's energy growing stronger as they climbed higher, the covenant coin in his palm growing hotter, like a beating heart. "We're almost there." Father Marcel's voice was urgent. "The pendulum is at the top of the tower. We must reach it before the hour strikes." Pierre nodded, gritting his teeth and quickening his pace. His legs were already aching, but he dared not stop. He knew the people in the square, the unconscious patients, and the magical Phantom Market were all counting on him. Finally, they reached the top floor. It was much larger than the staircase, with the massive pendulum hanging in the center, towering 2 stories high, its bronze weight glinting coldly in the lamplight. The walls were covered with intricate gears and springs, turning steadily with a tick-tock sound, but the hands on the clock face still remained stuck in 1454. "This is it." Father Marcel let go of Pierre's hand, pulling a small knife from his pocket, a tool Jean had given him before his death, to be used in the inheritance ceremony. Now, you must activate the covenant coin with your blood. Only your bloodline can resonate with the bell tower's energy. Pierre looked at the knife, feeling a flicker of fear, but he held out his left index finger anyway. "I'm not afraid," he said. Father Marcel nodded, making a small cut on Pierre's finger with the knife. Blood welled up immediately, dripping onto the covenant coin in his palm. Strangely, the blood did not flow off the coin, but was absorbed by it. The coin's surface glowed red, and the faded relief of Saint Michael became clear, as if coming to life. "Now, stand beneath the pendulum," Father Marcel instructed. "Regulate your breathing with the rhythmic breathing technique, then insert the coin into the groove at the top of the weight. Remember, your breathing must synchronize with the pendulum's swing. Your heartbeat must match the bell tower's rhythm." Pierre took a deep breath, beginning to breathe in the 4-2-6 rhythm Father Marcel had taught him. Inhaled for 4 seconds, his chest expanding as he felt the bell tower's energy flow into his body. Held his breath for 2 seconds, focusing the energy on the coin in his palm. Exhaled for 6 seconds, releasing the energy to synchronize with the pendulum's swing. Once, twice, 3 times. Gradually, Pierre felt his body grow light, his breathing perfectly aligned with the pendulum's movement, his heartbeat merging with the creak of the gears. He could see the bell tower's energy, feel the golden light extending from the pendulum to every corner of the city, covering the square, the factories, every home. "Now!" Father Marcel shouted. Pierre opened his eyes, watching as the pendulum swung toward him. He clutched the covenant coin tightly, aiming for the groove at the top of the weight, and with all his strength, he pushed the coin into place as the pendulum drew near. There was a soft click as the coin fit perfectly into the groove. In that moment, a miracle happened. The pendulum's swing suddenly accelerated, then slowed, stabilizing at a new rhythm. The gears on the wall let out a faint clink, and the hands on the clock face began to spin rapidly, moving from the time of 1454 to 1 in the afternoon of 1893. At the same time, Pierre felt a surge of energy flow from the pendulum into his body, coursing through his veins. He could hear the cheers of the crowd in the square, feel the unconscious patient's vital signs returning to normal, and see the phantom market fading away, the farmer's wife's figure blurring, the peddler's cries growing distant, until the entire market disappeared into the air, leaving only a few falling leaves. It worked. Father Marcel rushed over, embracing Pierre. "You did it, Pierre. You saved Brussels." Pierre leaned against Father Marcel, smiling tiredly. He could feel an eternal bond forming between himself and the bell tower. He was part of the tower, and the tower was part of him. From that day forward, he was Pierre Lemay, the 19th generation time guardian of the Lemay family, the anchor of time for Brussels. The pendulum continued to swing steadily, its tick-tock echoing through the tower. Sunlight streamed through the bell tower's windows, warming Pierre's face. He knew this was not an end, but a new beginning, a beginning of legacy, duty, and protection. Epilogue. The Hidden Guardian. In the first dawn after time returned to normal, Brussels was bathed in soft sunlight. Baker Fran always woke up promptly at 4 in the morning, and when he walked into his bakery, he found the dough had fermented normally, and the sky outside was faintly glowing. "Thank goodness, everything's back to normal," he shouted excitedly, beginning to prepare the bread. Banker Armand woke up at 7 in the morning, putting on his running clothes and heading to the park. His sense of time had fully recovered, and he no longer had the strange urge to eat breakfast at 7 in the evening. "I must have been overworked," he told himself, unaware that what he had experienced was not an illusion, but a time crisis spanning 400 years. In hospitals, the patients who had fallen unconscious due to the time chaos woke up one by one. Their bodies were healthy, but they had no memory of what had happened while they were unconscious. Doctors were baffled, only able to attribute it to a mass stress response. In the bell tower square, life returned to normal. Children chased each other, elderly men sat on benches playing chess, and peddlers set up stalls selling fresh fruit and bread. Only occasionally would someone mention the phantom medieval market, telling it is a magical legend. While sorting through his mailbag, Postman DuPont found the rusted 15th-century bronze penny. He took it to the Brussels History Museum and found the curator. "Sir, can you tell me about this coin?" he asked. The curator took the penny and examined it closely with a magnifying glass, his face filling with shock. "This is a 15th-century Brussels penny, with the portrait of Duke Philip III of Burgundy engraved on it," he said. "Coins like this are extremely rare, and this one is remarkably well preserved. It's a miracle." "Where did you find it?" DuPont looked out the window at the bell tower and smiled. "At a market on a Wednesday," he said. "A bread seller gave it to me as change." The curator laughed, thinking he was joking. "If you're willing to sell it, the museum will offer you a generous price." "No, I'm not selling it." DuPont put the penny back in his pocket, carefully tucking it into a small box. "It's my most precious possession, a memento of an extraordinary experience." As he walked out of the museum, he glanced at the bell tower. Sunlight glinted off the statue of St. Michael, and the pendulum's tick-tock was clearly audible. DuPont knew that this bronze penny was his connection to the past, the only proof that time had once been rewritten. Meanwhile, Pierre was practicing the rhythmic breathing technique atop the bell tower. He sat on a chair beneath the pendulum, his eyes closed, breathing in the 4-2-6 rhythm. He could feel the bell tower's energy flowing into his body through the covenant coin, merging with his bloodline. He could see every person in the city, every building, every street, all living in normal time, peaceful and happy. "Grandpa, I did it," Pierre whispered. The covenant coin in his palm grew warm, as if responding to him. Father Marcel walked in, holding a cup of hot milk. "Pierre, it's time to go home for breakfast," he said. Pierre opened his eyes, took the milk, and took a sip. "Father Marcel, do I have to come here every day?" he asked. "No, not every day," Father Marcel said. "You only need to synchronize your breathing with the bell tower once every hour. You are a guardian, but you are also a child. You need to have your own life." Pierre nodded. He knew that protecting the bell tower did not mean giving up his childhood, but finding a balance between duty and life. He would go to school, play with friends, just like any other child. But every hour on the hour, he would close his eyes and use his bloodline to infuse Brussels time with a new rhythm. As they walked out of the bell tower, they saw a watchmaker inspecting the clock face. It was Jacques, the most famous watchmaker in the city. "Father, young boy," Jacques greeted them warmly. "Do you know why the bell tower's time returned to normal?" "We checked every part, and found nothing wrong." Father Marcel smiled. "It was St. Michael's blessing, Jacques. The bell tower is Brussels' guardian. It would never let the city fall into chaos." Jacques nodded, half convinced. He did not believe in religion, but he could think of no other explanation. "Perhaps so," he said. "Either way, thank you. You helped calm the people." Pierre looked at Jacques, feeling a surge of pride. He knew that what he had done would never be known to everyone, but he had truly protected the city, and that was enough. Decades later, Pierre Lamy had grown into a middle-aged man. He had inherited his grandfather's mantle, becoming a watchmaker, a disguise for the Lamy family. They ran a small watch shop next to the bell tower, allowing them to guard the tower discreetly without attracting attention. The Covenant coin and the medieval bronze penny were hidden together in the deepest part of the bell tower's gearbox, silently telling the story of a legacy of time, duty, and protection. An invisible guardian watching over Brussels, generation after generation.